Switzerland, a country without an inflation problem. The biggest issue facing many nations in Europe this year is high inflation, which is currently at about 9% in the Eurozone alone. One European nation does, however, have relatively low inflation. That's Switzerland. Switzerland is considered one of the happiest and healthiest countries on the planet for several reasons. One being that the country is a financial haven with a stable economy and a fixed currency value. The country has been experiencing price increases and inflation for months, just like many other nations. However, compared to other countries, Switzerland's inflation rate is considerably lower. We can't say they have an inflation problem. What makes the Swiss rate so much lower than other countries? What are the inflation rates in the European Union and Switzerland at the moment? This episode will answer these questions and even shed light on what's going on with countries with runaway inflation. Before you go on, take a second to click on the subscribe button for amazing content like this. Now, let's get to today's video. Almost everywhere in the nations of the Eurozone and beyond, inflation and its effects on prices have been continuous issues. While the COVID epidemic has already caused inflation to spike, Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th hastened the process, raising the cost of raw materials and, in turn, consumer products. And due to the rising commodity costs, clogged supply chains, and competitive labor markets, inflation has soared to levels never seen in decades. These considerations apply to the majority of developed nations, but not Switzerland. In developed countries, the median inflation rate increased to 5.6% in February. This year, up to 5% over the previous year. Inflation has reverted to levels last seen some decades ago in absolute terms. In March, inflation inside the Eurozone spiked to 7.5% year on year. On the other hand, in Switzerland, even though inflation is currently higher than in recent months, the inflation rate only increased to 2.4% on an annual basis. This range is what the U.S. Federal Reserve wishes to get the U.S. inflation rate down to, and it's proving difficult. To better comprehend why commodity price shocks and supply chain bottlenecks have less of an impact on inflation in Switzerland than in other nations, it's helpful to consider the weight of the major spending items in the Consumer Price Index (CPI) basket, because they depict how households in the economies spend their money. Switzerland has had price increases in the past 20 years that, in certain situations, have been much less than those of other nations, according to yearly inflation rates. If we examine monthly inflation rates in 2018, the same phenomena will be visible. Switzerland's monthly inflation rate in July 2022 was 3.4%, while it was 7.5% in Germany and 8.5% in the US. More notably, the percentage at the end of July was 6.8% in France, 8.4% in Italy, and 9.3% in Austria, while it approached 20% in Baltic countries like Lithuania. Switzerland exhibits a variety of distinctive traits that have assisted in reducing inflation and even in the face of current world environments. While it's obvious the main cause is the strong Swiss franc, the euro's depreciation is also a contributing factor. However, Switzerland's under unique circumstances, and that also means that prices are generally high and higher in the EU. For instance, the hefty import taxes raise the cost of food. If the prices decline in the future in the rest of the world, Swiss consumers will not gain. This, together with the cost of other factors described below, contribute to Switzerland's significantly higher cost of living than the rest of Europe. One little-known fact is that the way inflation is calculated gives the narrative of inflation in an economy. You can't understand the true state of inflation if you don't know the methodological variations in the calculations of inflation. A basket of products and services that is representative of the nation as possible is put together to calculate inflation, and the prices of the items in the basket are monitored over time. The rise in these costs is what's referred to as inflation. In Switzerland, the basket's contents are different from those in EU member states. Transportation expenses, which are heavily impacted by growing energy prices but assigned a lower weight in Switzerland's basket of products, represent one notable distinction. Another factor is the currency of the nation. The strong Swiss currency, which is a big part of Switzerland's above-average price stability, is another major reason for the country's low inflation rate. Since 2008, the country's currency has appreciated considerably. By the summer of 2022, 1 Swiss franc was worth €1. The Swiss franc is resilient in both great and difficult times, occasionally even matching the value of the euro. This keeps import prices low, serving as a form of a defense mechanism. Low import costs have a cooling effect on inflation, since Switzerland imports far more than any other nations, particularly the United States and Germany. As a result, imports are now more affordable overall. The Swiss benefit from having a strong franc as it increases their purchasing power abroad. Also, the energy, food, housing, and healthcare sectors, but excluding energy, are where Switzerland, the Eurozone, and the US have the most variances from each other. The fact that the Swiss franc is seen as a safe haven for financial assets is also a bonus. Swiss francs are required by anyone who wants to invest money in Switzerland, and as a result, there is a rise in demand for the Swiss franc, which raises the currency's value. With the country's unique position in global banking, the Swiss franc has a lot to gain. Another factor is that fossil fuel consumption is low and power costs are also regulated, meaning the high energy cost has a minimized impact. According to a study by the EFG International Bank, energy prices are essential in explaining the variations in inflation, especially between Switzerland and the Eurozone. This is almost totally due to differences in the price of electricity. In February and March, the price of electricity in Switzerland rose by only 2.4%, while in the Eurozone it surged by 34.3%, according to the bank's analysis. This is due to the various electrical generation technologies providing cheaper alternatives to fossil-generated electricity. Less than 1% of the Switzerland's energy consumption is derived from oil and natural gas, according to data from the International Energy Agency, whereas 58% comes from renewable sources and from nuclear. Nuclear and hydroelectric power provides almost all of Switzerland's electricity needs. Nuclear power produced over 29% of the nation's electricity in 2021, while hydropower produced 61.5%. Rising prices for oil, gas, and coal, which are the major factors currently driving inflation in so many other economies, are therefore not having as large of an impact in Switzerland as they have, say, in France. Switzerland also has a tightly regulated power market monopoly. Private households are not allowed to choose their electricity supplier at will, and suppliers are required to base their pricing on the expenses of producing electricity effectively. Another factor is Switzerland has the highest percentage of prices regulated in Europe. In Switzerland, the cost of other goods and services is also tightly regulated. In addition to the cost of power, almost one-third of the items used to determine the inflation rate are subject to price controls. The share is higher than it is in any other European nation. Regulated prices are less subject to short-term market swings because merchants frequently can only change prices at specific times. Additionally, regulators frequently base their price decisions on factors unrelated to market trends, which prevents customers from being fully informed about what transpires on international markets. You must also know that in Switzerland, the increasing cost of agricultural goods also has little impact on the country's low inflation rate. The country's hefty import taxes on agricultural products are the driving force behind this. In Switzerland, the average tax on agricultural imports is a little under 43%, and it only amounts to 12.6% in the EU. Whether the agricultural commodity in question is produced in Switzerland determines the level of import taxes. If there are Swiss producers, there is a high duty. Tariffs are quite low for commodities that aren't made in Switzerland, such as cotton and seafood products. Swiss agricultural products enjoy a high level of protection, which means that domestic food prices are mainly independent of those on the international market. Thus, price increases on international markets have less of an effect on domestic prices. Switzerland also has a high output per labor rate. The Swiss franc's strength hurts the nation's companies' ability to compete internationally. However, their goods are in high demand all around the world. The Swiss economy's remarkable level of productivity is one factor in this. According to the OECD's Economic Analysis of Switzerland, published in January 2022, Swiss labor productivity is among the highest of OECD countries. As productivity increases, fewer inputs are needed to generate a given amount of goods. This lowers the inflation rate. In conclusion, even though the 9 million strong rich country appears to have low inflation, poor monetary policy could reduce Switzerland's purchasing power. Since 2015, Switzerland's reality has been characterized by a slack monetary policy and drop in buying power. The situation in Switzerland serves as a case study for the various manifestations of inflation, a complex phenomenon that inflation rates fail to adequately portray. Expanding the money supply in the absence of genuine collateral only makes the bank's balance sheets bigger, and as a result, purchasing power has decreased. Hope you enjoyed this video. We would love to see you again, so subscribe to the channel.